is time for the show. It is about that time right now. If you're watching later, you probably want to fast forward a little bit. I'm going to start putting the timestamp in the description for when the show actually starts, because we normally have about 5-10 minutes of just getting things together before we start, let people come in. But I'm running the studio more legit, so I will put the timestamp in. This is the new era of the Owen broadcast. We're putting things on the website. We're doing all kinds of things, man. We're doing all kinds of things officially. And as you know, if you are a longtime viewer of the show, I now have to copy and paste the link over to Twitter. I wrote the tweet. We are at that level of professional. But, I have to get the link, so we're just getting it going. I noticed that I watch some people's live streams, and they have like music playing during this time, but I don't know, I kind of like the organic feel of just letting you guys know what I'm doing. But maybe I'll switch over, maybe when I get more legit. I'm working on an outro. That's going to be a big step up. And I wrote the tweet, but it's too long. So I'm just going to edit this, and then we are officially hanging out. I have to take out one more word. Taking out these quotes. Live editing a tweet on the air. This is the most exciting TV that you're going to see. Taking out the word addition. It doesn't really add anything. And boom! It's posted. Boom! Isidore and Tyler Prime are in the chat. That's all we need. Like I say, let's just close it up. Close up the doors. Lock them up. That's it. If I was thinking, maybe I'd bump this on Instagram too, but I'm not going to. If we have a crazy amount of time, we'll do that. So yeah, you guys know the deal. We're going to hang for a second, do the pre-show, let people come in, and then we'll get this going. How's it going with you guys, though? I'm almost all set up here. I just got to move a few things around, honestly. But things are going really well here. It's been a crazy week. I feel like every week is a crazy week now. But I've mostly been really getting things going to another dimension over here. I've been working on the book all day, so I have this book coming out of the collected comics, and I've been talking about it for so long, but now I'm actually making it happen. And it's my book, so of course I think it looks awesome, but it really does look really good, honestly. It really does. And it's crazy because I feel like initially, it's going to fit with the theme of the show, what we're about to talk about with everything. There's an interesting aspect of the studio, which is like providence, I would say. I'm not so arrogant as to think that some theological force is like directly stewarding the show, but I always joke that maybe some low-ranking angel who's being punished has been tasked with overseeing our operation here. And when things get delayed, I always get stressed out. This is an interesting aspect of being an artist. I don't know if we've talked about, but things just take forever. And I was talking with my wife the other day, and I asked her, I was like, do you think all artists just for all of time are just perpetually under this feeling of like, how am I not getting more done? Every single thing takes 1 trillion years, 10 times longer than you think it does. And I've probably mentioned it before, but people should know if you watch the show, supposedly Da Vinci's last words, and that probably wasn't his literal last words, but one of the last things he said was he was sort of surveying his career in his mind, and he said, didn't anything get done? Didn't we do anything? And I feel like that is just how it feels making art. You're always like, it's not measuring up to what's in my mind. I have all these ideas. This should take 2 days. It takes freaking 6 months, I've definitely mentioned this anecdote before. It's not an anecdote, but it's a piece of literature. But in this story by Hawthorne, there's a story where, long story short, some woman marries like a mad scientist, and the point that's relevant for us is she eventually gets into his studio, and she opens his notebook, and he's like this crazy epic scientist that's done all this stuff, and when she opens his notebook, she realizes that everything he's ever done is like nothing compared to these plans he has in this notebook. The plans are like 20 times everything he's ever accomplished. And it sort of gives her an insight into his psychology and how he like feels all the time. But it definitely feels that way. On the flip side, though, think there is some element of providence in the delays, because I remember when I first planned the book out, I was like, oh, the book will be about 80 pages. You know, I stacked up all the comics I had. And that was sometime last year, and now I'm laying it out, and I'm like, wow, this thing's going to be like 200 pages. I mean, I'm going to have like a full-on 200-page book of comics. It's pretty insane, honestly. So that's really cool, man. That's the main thing I've been working on over here. I got the paints laid out. We're just going to wing it. It's all good. Feels that way in science, too, Iron Grid said. Nice, man. Nice. That does make me feel better, I suppose. But yeah, even with jobs and stuff, I mean, now I don't get delayed with jobs anymore. I closed out the last like long-term job that took way too long. But even with jobs, like I would get delayed on one. You know, not if it was something like time sensitive or something. Obviously, I'm a very professional guy. But then when I finally got around to it, I'd be like, oh wow, you know, if I did this last month, it wouldn't be as good as if I did it now because I picked up this new thing or something along the way. So who knows? Who knows how it all works? But one of the things that inspired me to sort of push over a little bit, and I guess you could say go a little bit harder, is I'm just making sure I have all the paint here before I really get to talking to you guys. I do. I got the paint here, and do I have the brushes around? Obviously, we're going to need those. I really did just like roll into the studio. But anyway, one of the things that made me push over the edge, I guess you could say, into getting the website and everything together is I did this interview. We'll get started in like 4 minutes. We'll start at 7:10. We'll start 10 minutes late. Not 10 minutes late. This is part of the show. But I did this interview, and it was actually like a full-on radio interview. I tweeted about it. Of course, everyone doesn't see every single thing posted on Twitter ever, but it'll actually be on the radio. It's kind of insane. And it was really interesting because it really forced me to clarify in my mind exactly, I don't want to say exactly what it is I'm doing, but you can imagine, you know, everyone here watching this, you know, we're all part of the same like weirdo internet sphere, like to some extent probably, or maybe you've drifted in here from the outside, which is great too, but most of the people watching this will be part of the same kind of weirdo internet sphere. And all of a sudden I'm talking to this guy who is interviewing me for his show where like normal people are going to be watching it, you know, and all of a sudden like clarifying exactly what it is I do. You know, I didn't really have it pared down to like a soundbite. You know what I mean? Like all the interviews I've done, I'm getting better at, you know, interviewing and giving interviews, and it sounds really pretentious, but just talking to people in general when it's being recorded for others. And every time I've done it, I've sort of been inside the sphere. You know, I'm on a show, and I can pretty much bank that most of the people know who I am already because of the nature of it. But I got really blindsided because I was like, oh, wow, a lot of people listening to this are obviously going to have no idea who I am, duh. And the guy's asking me questions, and the guy was a great guy. He's a cool guy. Some of you guys probably know him. His name's Ed Opperman, I think. He runs a show called The Opperman Report. It's actually pretty well known. It's kind of crazy that he interviewed me, honestly. And I think that he also, we did it really fast, like we planned to do it, and then we had to do it really quickly, like in terms of the time frame. And I think he also was kind of like, oh, you have like a podcast? And I was like, well, no, I don't have a podcast. And like subtextually, he's being a nice guy, but he's kind of like, what do you do exactly? Like, what do you know? So that was really interesting. So in like 150 cities, I'm literally going to be on the radio. It's kind of insane, actually. It's completely nuts. And the other funny thing, I'll just kind of wrap up this anecdote and then we'll get going. I think we're just going to use one brush. We'll do like a one brush painting. We haven't done that in like a little while. But so I went on and I thought what we were going to talk about, I guess I got my own wires crossed. I thought what we were going to be talking about was the whole sort of idea I have about DMT and it connecting to these sort of folkloric and mythological things and all this stuff. So I was really locked into talking about that. And in my mind, I looked over the Seraphim Rose book that I have, and I was, you know, thinking about it, how I was going to present it and all this stuff. And I got really blindsided because I guess that's not exactly what he was planning on talking about. He was like more like free form, like let's just talk, you know. And it was interesting. So we do the first half of the show, and it goes really well, you know. He asked me like a bunch of random questions, not in a bad way, but asked me a bunch of random stuff. He asked me about Ted Kaczynski, actually. I was like, that's really random that you're asking me that, but I explained like what over-socialization is and kind of tied it into, you know, general, sort of an apolitical description of the psychological totalism that is sort of infecting the world at the moment, and we were talking about that for a minute, and we get to 30 minutes or so, and there's a break, and it's like a radio show, so there's a literal commercial break. So, he stops recording. I don't know what he does, but it stops, And he's getting water, I'm getting water or whatever. And then he asked me, he's like, oh, so what should we talk about next? The next half goes super fast. So I was like, well, we can talk about whatever, but, And in my head, I'm like, should I go for it? Should I go for the explanation of this really weird idea I have? Not me. It's not just me now at this point. Now more people have kind of figured it out. But do I go for cramming an explanation of how DMT is going to be breaking in terms of changing the culture and how it's hooked backwards into things like UFOs and mythology and all this stuff? And I'm literally thinking about it. I just feel like this is a good anecdote, so I'll wrap this up and then we'll get the show going. So I'm thinking about it. I'm like, man, can I really fit it in like 15 minutes? Like, am I just going to go for it and risk sounding like a completely insane person? At the same time, I feel like it's kind of spiritually important. Like, if some random guy is driving along and tunes into this radio station, it actually would be worthwhile for me to be like, hey, dude, like, I don't know if you realize, but all this stuff is kind of connected. So I'm thinking about it, and he's like, oh, yeah, you mentioned missing 411, like what? And then as I'm thinking about it, he's like, okay, we have to go back on right now. Boom. So we get back on. And he asked me, like, you were mentioning missing 411. Like, what were you, during the break, you mentioned that. Like, what were you going to say about that? So I just went for it. And I just went for it, honestly. And I'm really used to talking and pairing that with trying to make a point. I guess you would call that rhetoric, but I wouldn't say I'm trained in rhetoric or anything. So I'm going for it, and I don't know if you guys have done any like public speaking stuff, but when you go out on the limb, you can literally feel it, or I could feel it. So I'm like, yeah, so, and I start with the UFOs, and I can see it in my mind how I'm going through it, where I'm going to be like, UFOs, but that doesn't add up with the explanation. Then missing 411, what's the deal with that? And then fairy stuff, that seems really random, but it's all the same archetypes, and guess what? DMT ties this all together, and here's why that's important. So I'm seeing myself going through the map, and I can hear myself talking, so I'm thinking, like, all right, I just definitely lost like 20% of people who are like, what is this guy talking about? And then he started to ask me something, and I was kind of like, I didn't say this, but I was like, yo, I really have to get to the end of this explanation, otherwise this is just going to be like a crazy mess. But I did it, and he seemed into it. It was interesting because I was like, I feel like for Sour from Rose, I have to do this. If I'm going to be on the radio, I don't care about plugging my stuff. I mean, I care, we did it. But what's more important to me is if I can hit like the 10% of people listening that might be receptive and able to do something with this information, just to be like, hey, as long as they put me on the radio, just so you guys know, like, aliens are kind of low-key demons, and they're pumping DMT into the culture so that this stuff is happening, and you don't realize how crazy it is because it used to be in the Amazon, and now they're talking about it on Vice News, and Lindsay Lohan says, do ayahuasca, and here's why this is all hooked into these people disappearing in national parks. It's actually just a really good example of... So it was really fun. It was really, really fun, and the idea of someone driving along at like 10 p.m. and hitting that is really exciting. Just a day in the life, man. Anyway, let's just do this, man. Feels good to be back on the air with you guys. We missed last week, and wasn't too pleased about that. How's it going, everyone? How's it going? Intro music for the show, Painted Worlds. It's a painting show. The band's called Painted Worlds. We didn't plan it that way, but check it out. Check it out on Bandcamp and Spotify. Takes massive check from the band off screen. Anyway, How's it going, guys? I just want to jump right in. Just want to get this going right now. Talked a little bit about, what's going on in the studio before the show. That's kind of how we do it in case it's your first time here. Do a little pre-show and then we jump in. And last week of the month, we always do chat source symbology edition, where I take suggestions from the chat and we make a whole picture just from the chat. I didn't know if we should do it this week because we missed it last week. It's kind of end of the month thing. It's super official, right? So I thought we would just kind of wing it a little bit. I will be looking at the chat a little bit more, so we can kind of do like a light call-in thing. Like if people want to ask me stuff or talk about anything, or maybe I'll take some suggestions, we can work that in also. So since I mentioned that, just so you know, if you want me to see what you write in the chat, you have to put @OwenCyclops, like Spoon of Salty just did there. Otherwise, I'm not going to see it because I'm doing the whole thing. I'm not reading the entire chat. That being said, last question before we jump in. Well, not really because we're taking questions, I guess. But Spoon of Salty said, where can we watch or listen to that, the radio show we were just talking about? It's going to be online soon, maybe in like a week or so, but it's also on the radio this week, he said. I made a tweet about it. I'll make another one if someone tags me, but it's going to be on in like California, Nevada, I think it's Utah and Florida. He said 4 states and 100 plus cities. Maybe he said 150 cities. I don't remember. But I'll plug it, and yeah, it's pretty cool. So I'm really hoping someone's just driving along and happens to tune into it. That would be pretty awesome. I'm hoping to just get a tag on Twitter with a video of someone's little, car stereo, and it's me talking about, over-socialization or some of the other things we talked about. Anyway, let's jump in. I'm excited, and I got some images in my brain I want to vent out. I've been doing computer work, which is fun, but it's not the same as painting itself, so I'm really amped to do this right now. And I just want to let you guys know what's in my brain before we jump into the picture. The show has a meta creative dimension, so what's going on in my brain is relevant to what we're going to paint right now. And I got a little thing going on here. So if you've been keeping up with the show, maybe you watch every episode, maybe you're just here for the first time, but I've been doing a little 1800s America thing. Obviously weird. What is the situation with American Christian? What does it mean to be North American Christian? We got this weird thing going on, and it kind of comes out in the 1800s, all these different new groups, and then speaking in tongues started in America. And it just fits my vibe for a variety of reasons, so I've been looking into it pretty hard. And an interesting theme has come up in there, which is the theme of prophets and prophecy. You can see here I have this book. It's called A History of Prophecy in Israel. I didn't read this whole book yet. And we're not really going to be talking about the old school prophets too much. But I thought this was interesting because I wanted to jump into this topic. Not that I have a whole monologue prepared, but just in terms of the picture and symbolism and what we're thinking about in the background. Because it's really weird in America in the 1800s. You get all these different prophets coming up. I mean, you have Seventh-day Adventists. They have Ellen White. I don't know if people know, but she was a prophet. I mean, in their religion. In their subdivision of Christianity, if you want to put it that way. But she had visions. She was a straight-up prophet, and they viewed her as a prophet. You have the Shakers. That really started before the 1800s, but they have their own sort of foundery prophet woman. I didn't look into that too much yet. You have Mary Baker Eddy. She's a straight-up prophet in her situation, starting Christian Science. She writes a whole book that they see as basically being on par with the Bible. In fact, some of them kind of even phrase it as the Bible being underneath it. And then you have Mormons. Mormons obviously have their own prophet, Joseph Smith, and they have their whole thing going on. So I'm just asking myself, like, what is in the water in America in the 1800s that there's just prophets on popping up? Like, what's going on? And I think it really relates to the future of American Christianity and American Christianity itself in a really interesting way. I've talked about it before on the show, but I think the general theory is that, America was expanding west. It's a new country, so they needed a new religion, and it just kind of organically was birthed from the people. That's somewhat compelling, but I don't know, these kind of like larger social explanations for individual people playing things out never really totally sits right with me. I thought this was an interesting spin on it. Not this book, but, the prophets in ancient Israel as it relates to these people. Because in this book I really like, it's called Christian Mysticism by W.R. Inge. His last name's I-N-G-E. He makes a pretty bold claim in there. I don't know if I 100% agree with it, but the whole book's about Christian mysticism. And he starts with the Old Testament prophets. And he says, in the Old Testament, I'm not saying I think this is true, I just think it's a really interesting take. He says in the Old Testament, in Old Testament Judaism, if you want to call it that, he says there's no real mysticism. The prophets are just these microphones almost that God sort of picks up, speaks through them, and that's it. Who they are and their situation is not nothing, but it's not really this mystical union with God. It's like God temporarily picks them up, uses them as a microphone, and then puts them back down again. So he says mysticism in Christianity really starts with the New Testament. Thought that was interesting. I'm not saying it's true, but I thought it was interesting. And I feel like it also spills forward in time from that kind of desperate need for newness and this kind of desire for a direct connection with God that exists outside the context of tradition or a church. Most American Christian stuff, I'd say there's an underlying subtext of let's just get rid of tradition and go back to the source and get this going on. And I have this book. This is a really weird book. I don't like to be negative on the show. I don't recommend this book. I'm just showing it to you because it fits into the story a little bit. When I was first getting into Christianity, like a while ago, I got this book because I heard someone talking about it. And I read it. And it was so weird. It's such a weird book. And I didn't know what to make of it. And I just got this really strange energy from it. And it was only a few weeks ago that I realized that these people and the people that wrote and published this book are part of this almost kind of like neo-charismatic Christian movement where the whole thing is like, yeah, we're going to like directly connect with God. And I had this other book. It's called You Will Prophecy. I wanted to have it because the cover literally just says in huge letters, You Will Prophecy. It's just a visual device for the show. But I just feel like a lot of modern Christian stuff in America takes on this energy of like, well, if we're looking back at the Bible, there are prophets there. Why aren't there prophets now? We can totally just have this new rebirth of X, Y, and Z, and it exists outside the context of anything that would contain it, outside the context of a larger church or an ecclesiastical body or tradition or even like, let's say, an orthodoxy, something like a patristic tradition that would contain it. So it's almost this explosive thing. And I don't know, I don't really have a point. It's just more an interesting question to raise. It's always more interesting questions than answers, but sort of interesting theme. So I thought we'd make an image about, the idea of a prophet or, directly connecting with, the spirit in general, whether that's good or bad. Say it's a double-edged sword. It could be a little bit neutral. And I found this picture I drew a long time ago. I think I drew this when I first moved down here. But I was thinking about all that, and I saw this picture over here on my board, and I thought, this is perfect. This is perfect, actually. You got this guy, his head's on fire. He's birthing these like vines and this sort of fecund life coming out of him. He has stuff inside him. So we've never used this sketch to do a painting the whole time on the show. We've always just sort of winged it, and I think that's part of what's interesting. But I thought maybe we want to try something new. So we have this sketch here. I'm not going to copy this just like word for word, obviously, because that would just be like paint by numbers copying it over. But we'll use this as a base. I'm just going to have this off to the screen, but this is the base that we'll start with. There's something about this that really captured that almost like mad, burning, slightly crazed prophet energy that I think of when I was thinking about all these people and the idea of like a prophet and all the weight that carries, especially the fire head. We're going to start there, obviously. It looks really tight, right? So let's do it. Let's do it. And let's see, I'm just going to grab a brush and we're just going to get going. We're just going to get this party started right now. And I want to, in terms of the visual aspect, the visual texture, the visual situation, I want to push the wet bleeding colors and the medium. I want to push the medium a little bit. I want to make sure no matter how this goes that I don't get 100% sucked into, the tiny little symbols and sniper rifle style, making everything perfect. I want to push things a little bit in terms of the visual style. So let's see how that goes. So we're going to start with the fire. Once I get this going, I'll poke in the chat and see if anyone's asking me anything or anything like that. But, if we're starting with fire, not to keep it too classic, but we got to start with the cadmium scarlet. Obviously, this is the warmest color in here. And I guess right off the bat, we already have a little bit of a two roads forking kind of situation because we could make it just the fire. We could cut it in half and have the red fire and the blue fire. I think that symbolically in a way that would be interesting because I take on a little bit of the Renaissance color interpretation when I get with the reds and blues and warm and cool colors symbolically because in some Renaissance art, we think of the devil as being red, but in some Renaissance art, like in the baptistry in Florence, probably the most famous example, the devil is actually blue. He's blue because he's cold. He's the furthest from God's light, so they painted him blue, which is really cool. And let's do something like that because, the idea of taking transmission from God into your own hands, it is a double-edged sword. Of course, God does interact with people and the world and everything, but I think that could also lead you astray. It could go either way, right? So we'll start with the red, and then we'll kick over into the blue. We'll have both fires. So I got the cool fire and the warm fire. And I just threw down a little bit of water. So I don't actually know how the paint's going to react with the water, but we'll see. It might fuzz out entirely. It might not fuzz out that much. Let's see how it goes. Cool. That looks really good, actually. I'm going to move this down a tiny bit. Perfect. And we'll get one more strand up. Perfect. Perfect. And then I guess I'll just come down the other side with the blue. I guess we'll just kind of paint both in at the same time. I always thought, you know, that idea of the blue devil was really solid. I don't see it expanded on too much. You know, it would be cool to see like a blue scene of hell or something. I actually can't think of any paintings where I've fully seen that. But like an icy, cool hell. I guess that doesn't happen because in scripture it says like the burning lake of fire and stuff, right? So I guess that's why. But the idea of a cool underworld kind of makes me think of, I'm going to say this incorrectly, but Sheol, the Jewish kind of underworld. Isn't that like a cold place? I've heard some people say that. I don't know if it's true or not, though. You can see already, just so you know how like lively it is, the water's already dried. So I got that like fuzzy effect over here, but over here the water already dried up. So I'm just going to come over here and pull this blue out. If you want to get some interesting painting info, you can see how long this brush is. That actually means that it's not for watercolor and stuff like that. This long handle is the giveaway that you're working with a brush that's actually for like more traditional painting with oil paint or acrylic paint. But I don't care. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter for us right now. And I'm going to come in on the inside too. Let's see. So we'll come in over here. Something about making the person's head this flame is just so appropriate in a weird way, right? The head is like the seat of thinking. It's how people recognize you. It's how people see you. And just seeing this like flaming, burning head, I think is super appropriate. I'm going to come in here with this primary blue. And yeah, I was thinking about, it's kind of funny, I made a joke about it online, but in Seventh-day Adventism, like I was saying, Ellen White is a prophet, right? And then she has this husband. She's married to this guy named James White. So like imagine being married to someone and they are literally the prophet of your religion. So funny. If I was like pitching it to like a Seventh-day Adventist audience, you could do a really good stand-up routine about that, you know? Like you get in a fight and she's like, well, I'm literally the prophet. You're wrong. You're wrong, buddy. Sorry. I am 100% sure that you're wrong because I literally talk to God. I actually do. And the theme of like modern times sort of impinging, I know it's probably not a word, but like infringing, I guess, onto the more classical like 1700s Christian situation. You know, you're in the 1800s. You're kind of right in the middle in a way. But I was listening to, so right now I'm going into the Mormon stuff, just to like get the vibe and see what's going on. So I listened to some talks today while I was working. This looks really tight already. Looks really good. But what color are we putting in the middle? Let's put like a yellow in the middle. So I was listening to some Mormon talks, and one of these guys, you know, I just had it on the background while I was working, and one of these guys said point blank, in the middle of this like hour and a half long lecture, he was like, they say, you know, do we need, what does religion mean in the time of space? Do we need a new cosmic religion for the space age? And he was like, Mormonism has that. He was like, we're ready to go. Let's do it. I thought that was such an interesting thing to just say off the cuff, because I think part of the birth of all this stuff, and then I think you see it, like I said, trickling down into more traditional forms of American Christianity, is this question of what does all this modern stuff mean for the spirit, for the theological spirit. I have a book over here that's about like nuclear war and theology. I have one of them over here that's about, I don't have it, but space is obviously a big one, so it's kind of an interesting question. Okay, so we got this flame up here, and I really like the red and the blue. Looks really good, actually, especially with the yellow. This is starting out really good. And then let's see, we'll get his neck coming down. I'll kind of just paint this in. I don't really want to commit one way or the other in terms of the red and blue. It'd be nice to keep it neutral. I'm looking at the colors. If I use a brown, then it's like his skin color, and then we got a whole thing in there. I could use just like a peach color. This is like European people's skin color, but I don't know. I don't really like that color, honestly. It's called Naples Yellow Light. Let's just use crimson. I think we can get away with crimson. I don't want to make it like he's like a particular ethnicity or something. Not that I have an issue with that. It just doesn't really fit this picture. So yeah, Ellen White, one of her first, I think it was her first one. Her first vision. She has this vision of like Jupiter and Saturn in this living room, literally. And she's sitting there, and I think she even says, don't quote me on this. You know, it's not like I prepared like an academic lecture for you guys. We did that a few times, but I didn't do it this time. But it's something like she has this vision, and they're in this living room, and she's like, I'm getting a vision. I see a planet, and it has something like 4 or 5 moons. And someone in the living room is like, that's Jupiter. She's seeing Jupiter. Jupiter has 5 moons. And she says something else about another planet, and the person's like, that's Saturn. She's seeing Saturn. That's how many moons Saturn has. And, you know, if you're pitching it from the Seventh-day Adventist perspective, they're like, and she had no idea. She had no way of knowing that. Whoa, it's a miracle. And what's interesting is the person I was listening to telling that story, of course, that was in the 1800s, right? So at the time, they did think Jupiter only had that many moons. But of course, now you may know, if you're a science nerd, that it has like 20 or 30 moons. And the person explained it as like, well, yeah, but if she said the correct number, if she said 30 moons back then, no one would have believed her. So it must have been like providential that she said the number that they happened to think that it had at the time. I don't know. Is that coping or not? It's kind of hard to tell. Okay, so we got to decide what this guy's wearing. And once we decide what this guy's wearing, I'll look in the chat, because I'm sure people have asked me some stuff. This is looking pretty hot already, though. Huh, nice pun with the flames. In this picture, I have him wearing a hoodie, sort of like a sweatshirt, and I kind of like that because, wow, working with a sketch is so nice because I can show you guys what I'm thinking as we go along. Maybe we'll do that a little bit more. I kind of like in the hoodie because something about the modern prophet is an interesting mix of like Old Testament energy, but then also they like drive a car. Well, not in the 1800s, but you know, they're around in like modern times. I think something about that dichotomy is part of what's fascinating about the whole situation. So I'm going to put him in that hoodie. I'm going to put him in like a sweatshirt like that. We got to decide what color. I could just go with the crimson. Crimson would have been a perfect color, but I already put the crimson down. I want there to be like a delineation between the two. Let's go with, something's telling me that the Prussian blue might be the way to go. We could lean into the summer energy with a green. This is kind of a green-blue. I think we should go with this. By the way, I'm really feeling the paper background here. It makes it look so much more legit. So I'm going to paint this in. I'll paint in just the frame of it, just the outline of it, and then we'll see what the next move is. Okay, let's see. Questions. Speaking of future Christianity, do you have any thoughts on many modern churches adopting modern social ideals that contradict the faith? Kind of open, I know. Yeah, I mean, obviously I would be kind of against that, obviously, but I think it's an interesting question that I think a lot of people are wrestling with, right? People DM me all the time. I don't know why. I love it, actually. I mean, I know why. Obviously, I know why, but people often hit me up to tell me about their spiritual journey. I'm leaving enough room so we can put something here in this area. That's what I'm thinking right now. And I think a lot of people have that problem, and interestingly, if I'm being totally unbiased, the anecdotal data that I get, it's not really limited to one group or anything like that. People tell me, you know, I was going to this kind of church and I had to leave because of all this stuff they were pushing, and then someone else will hit me up and have the same exact opposite trajectory. They'll say, I was going to X kind of church and I had to go to Y because of the stuff they were pushing, whereas the other person went the other direction. So kind of makes me think there's no real true insulation from it. You know, it's probably on a case-by-case basis. But, yeah, I mean, it sucks. I'm going to put this arm coming out over here. Perfect. I think it's also interesting because that sort of inherently goes with the ecclesiology question. The question of who has the authority in the church. If you've been here a while, we did a bunch of images all about spiritual authority and stuff a while ago. It's one of the big things I like asking myself, who has legitimate spiritual authority? how's that passed down. So yeah, I think also something about that has to do with like, I mean, I keep saying American only because I can only speak to the American situation, but the kind of American like misconceptions about Christianity, you know what I mean? I mean, we see it on the internet all the time, but like if I was to take the dumbest parody of it, it's like, well, if you're Christian, like how are you being mean right now? Don't you have to be nice literally all the time to everyone? And it's like there's an aspect of that that is rooted in something like quasi-legitimate, you could say, like, okay, yeah, like, I mean, I shouldn't be like a jerk, but at the same time, it's not, you know, you guys know the deal. Okay, I kind of gave him these huge arms, almost like the clothes are like too big, because I want to be able to fit stuff in there. And I'm going to come over here, I'm just going to close this up right here. Ultimately, the proportions won't matter too much, because I'm just going to try and like lovingly fit a lot of stuff in here, so the proportions won't matter too much. Maybe we'll come back to that question. I may be speaking out my rear end, but in the Didache written in the 1st century taught by the apostles, it seems the term prophet was applied to early ordained priests. Very neat. Yeah, it's really cool, actually. I don't know about that. I haven't read the Didache yet. I've drifted a little far from the ancient stuff, but I am going to hit that again. I actually have a list behind me taped to the wall of things I'm going to hit when I circle back to the ancient situation. I recently was baptized in the Catholic Church, and I was curious if/when you get baptized, what saint would you pick as your saint? Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely vibe really hard with St. Augustine. I know he's like one of the most common, popular ones. That doesn't mean it's bad. But obviously I vibe with Augustine. He's kind of like the patron saint of the whole operation in a way here. I mean, I didn't like dedicate it like a patron saint, but he really is. Actually, I wish you could see. I'm literally wearing the St. Augustine shirt right now. I'm literally wearing the shirt right now. So, definitely, he's probably my favorite saint overall for sure. If I was picking one for a patron saint, I don't know. By the way, I'm loving the like texture we're getting in here. So good. I don't know exactly what technically is supposed to be included when you choose a patron saint. I mean, is it really just like your favorite saint? Because I think if I picked one, Saint Cyprian, who is like a reformed occultist, might be who I pick, because that's really more of like the struggle in my spiritual journey now. Not like not doing black magic, but something about coming from that background I think characterizes my spiritual journey a little bit more than what St. Augustine represents to me. But I don't know. Maybe St. Cyprian, maybe St. Augustine. That'll be my answer. Okay. I was going to keep going in the pants, but let's just keep it one thing at a time over here. So I really like, in our mock-up here, we have this vine and the fruits coming down. This also really fits the kind of spring, summer energy in the air right now. It's also always like a subtext for making a picture, at least for me here, what season it is. But I want to jump off of this a little bit, so I think what we'll do is maybe we'll use this motif on one side, and on the other side, we can put something else. It could be cool to have like a crumbling tower, or maybe just a tower representing, you know, the Tower of Babel, sort of reaching beyond your station in the cosmos. I think, you know, declaring yourself a prophet and becoming a prophet, or trying to prophecy yourself, probably has an aspect of that woven into it, or maybe something like that. Maybe a church even. Something like that. But first we're going to throw in this vine situation. And it doesn't matter that I couldn't find it, because it was literally just going to be a visual prop. But that book, You Will Prophecy, I just thought the cover was so indicative of a lot of the vibe I get for the more charismatic Christian groups that I look into, because a lot of them really feel and think that, I don't know how much people have looked into this if you're not from that background, but a lot of them really feel and think that, you know, having like gifts of the Spirit is the de facto marker of having a legitimate spiritual life. I had someone talk to me about that too. Someone hit me up and said, you know, they're going to this church. I'm going to throw down some more green, throw down some leaves, and we'll get the grapes going and stuff. Someone contacted me and said, I'm really not, I always lead off that I'm not qualified to answer these questions, but I guess people just want to talk, and I do find it interesting. So they're going to this church, and the priest is like, have you had this, like, he didn't say it this way, of course, but, have you had this hyper emotional, that this is phrasing in a negative way. Have you had this very emotional, conversion story? Do you have a moment that you can point to where you're, again, he didn't say it this way, like on the floor crying, like, wow, this is really the moment that I am accepting Jesus into my life? And this woman was like, no, I don't have that. I mean, I've kind of just like been Christian. I'm definitely Christian, but I don't have that. And he was kind of making her doubt it. He was kind of like, well, you have to have something like that. Otherwise, I don't know what he was saying to her specifically. I don't want to caricature this guy when he's not here. But he was saying to her, like, well, you have to have that. And if you don't have that, then, you have an issue. And she was having a really hard time with it. And she hit me up about it and asked me what I thought. And, I mean, I'm not equipped to say, like, that is or isn't legitimate, but I see that as being downstream from certain sociological phenomena, like the Great Awakening and things like that, where the emphasis became put on the emotional aspect of the spiritual life, which has some legitimacy, I'm sure. But I think it's kind of a lot to take someone who's going to your church and is like, yeah, I'm Christian. I mean, totally, like, I'm 100% down, and then tell them, well, unless you had this hyper emotional moment, then you're kind of not. And she's having a really difficult time with it. She told me, and she left that church actually, but she wasn't sure if she should or not. I didn't tell her to leave the church, obviously. I don't tell people what to do. And for me, that's almost like downstream of like the Pentecostal stuff. I don't know if people know, but like you can even pinpoint exactly when and where the Pentecostal stuff started, to this place called Azusa Street, and that's where it all kind of got going, really. Okay, I'm gonna throw down a little magenta. We'll get a little purple, red, grapes going on. If I want it to be very sophisticated, I'm gonna start painting a little bit looser so we can keep things moving like a little faster, keep things interesting. I'm just gonna grab some of this crimson, grab some of this red, and I think once I paint these grapes in, I'm just gonna put them in like these kind of dots. Perfect. Wow, it looks really good. Nice. And I'm gonna put the green ones in the middle. I was hoping this would kind of give us a little bit of almost like just more texture, man. We just need more texture in the paintings. That's always what we need on the show. More and more and more of that. Let's see. I'm going to try and get that light white grapey color. Where's the white paint? Where is the white paint? That's really interesting. Oh, it's right here. Perfect. So yeah, it's really interesting for me tracing like all those trends and stuff like that, because it does manifest in people's lives, and sometimes they don't know why. Not everyone has the time to sit around and like LARP as like an amateur theologian, but I do. So this green color, it almost looks like white, but it is green. It's a little too light. I mean, it's a little too cool. Green grapes aren't really this color. You can actually see it. Yeah, we need to add a little bit of the cool yellow in here. Get a little bit more on the yellow end of the spectrum. Okay, let's see. We missed the chat for a minute. If I miss anything in the chat, feel free to just repeat yourself. Dante's Hell has the ice motif. That's sick, actually. I didn't know that. And I sketched out a little something from Dante a while ago, but I never did anything with it. I sketched out the rose he has, where it's the rose, and you have all the angels inside the rose. I want to do something with that eventually. I think that would be really cool. Perfect. Oh, tell me that's not the perfect white grapes color. I mean, come on. Are you serious? It's perfect. Groused, are you a perennialist? No, I'm not. We could go into it if people want to, but no, I don't think I could be a perennialist because I'm really anti the idea that religions have like a fundamentally similar core, and that seems to be the whole deal with perennialism. I actually really don't think that's true deep down, so that sort of precludes me from being a perennialist. I could explain why if people want to. We've talked about it a little bit before, but it's always good to go over. I think I'm just going to wing it a little bit and paint in this tower over here. I like the idea of the tower because, you know, prophets do like help build and create things in a sense, but also the tower, it has a little bit of folly in the Christian worldview, because the main tower I'm thinking of is the Tower of Babel. So if we're talking about modern prophets, I'm not judging anyone in particular, but I think in general taking up the mantle of leaning on needing let's call them signs and wonders for your spiritual life. Seems unwise. I'm open to being convinced. It seems unwise, though. It's actually interesting because on the radio show, one of the first things he asked me, you're Christian? And I said, yeah, The first thing he asked me is like, so do you believe in like prophecy and speaking in tongues and like baptism of the Holy Spirit? And I was like, whoa. It's like, whoa. How long is this answer supposed to be? It's like, well, kind of. I'm gonna try and put the tower in the same texture as these. Let's see if that works. Just like painting some bricks. It might look kind of whack, but we'll see. If it looks lame, we can come back in. I need to put the bricks a little bit tighter. I was like, kind of, sort of, but not really. Am I gonna go into like an explanation of like how speaking in tongues fits into my cosmology at the moment? Maybe I'm gonna go into that right now. Let's move this a little bit. Perfect. And just so people know it's a tower, we're gonna put a window in here, one of the arched windows. And I really want to put the triangle top on it. I've only seen a tower like that one time when I was in Ireland. But we're gonna put the triangle top on. We're putting it on. Boom. Perfect. Great. Okay. Perfect. I didn't want this to be too dark, and it's not. It's perfect. And just to keep the textures going, I'm going to grab a little bit of this and just pick this up. Perfect. That was too much. It was too much. But let's just roll with it. I'm going to come in here, throw down the window. Same deal. Oh, yeah, that looks dope. Great. All right, what's the next one? Do you have any thoughts on Presbyterianism? I just moved next to a Presbyterian church. Was thinking of checking it out. No, I don't. They're more like, it's just, I think, didn't Presbyterian start in like Scotland or something? I haven't totally mapped out like the whole thing there, but I think with a lot of those, I mean this in a positive way. I mean this actually in like a complimentary way. A lot of the more normal Protestant groups that I think you see around in America, I think their differences are ecclesiological. In case people don't know, or in case I'm using that term incorrectly, by ecclesiology I mean how the church is organized. So I think that those are their main differences, really. I mean, I know there are more differences than that, but it's nothing like, Mormon versus like Catholic or something. Obviously, you probably know that if you're asking me. But no, I don't know too much about them. Okay, so this is going really well. Let's get these hands in. We'll do a red hand and a blue hand. We'll kind of keep that motif coming down. I think Presbyterianism is called that because it was organized around presbyters, right? Which is kind of like I really don't know, sort of like a high-ranking bishop. I think presbyter is even part of where the word priest comes from, but now I'm just totally winging it on that answer. So let's see, I can come all the way out, obviously, so let's just throw it in here. Perfect. And I'm more concerned about having room in the hand to put something than I am about the shape of the hand, honestly. Perfect. We'll come in on the blue on the other side. What else we got? Most Catholics pick at like 11 or 12, so I can tell you for sure the reasons aren't always the most deep. That's really funny, talking about the saints. Were you ever able to answer if it's okay to lust after your own wife? Yo, I asked that question on Twitter. That is a great philosophical question. It seemed like the best answer that I got was that lust, the question of, so in case people don't keep up with literally every tweet I make, imagine not doing that. But I went to Google, is it okay to lust after your own wife? And a bunch of Google suggestions came up indicating that many, many other people have asked that. So I posted it just to see what answers I would get. And what's interesting is that it's where theology and philosophy meet. Actually, they never separate, actually. But what's interesting is that question is really answered by what is lust. Is it okay to lust after your own wife? Is really asking the question, what is lust? Which is kind of a deep question, actually. But the best answer that I got was that lust is technically wanting pleasure for its own sake, or, I guess I'm tacking this on, this is less philosophical, or in like a perverted or weird way. That's not very philosophical, because then what is perverted? But I like the answer that lust is wanting pleasure for pleasure's sake, because that feels correct. Like if I see my wife and I'm like, wow, I love this woman so much, like I just want to be, physical with her, with some kids watching, want to be physical with her. That seems pretty okay. It seems pretty good, right? But then if I'm being weird about it and I'm like, man, I really just want to like have sex right now. Like, where's my wife? That seems bad, right? Kinda, maybe. I don't know, not bad, but it seems unideal. So that was the answer that I got that I thought was the best. Some people were just flat out like, no, you can't. Okay, we got some decisions to make here. I don't know what we're going to do with this area right here. This is the chest. It's the heart. I mean, we could put like a burning heart in here. I don't like to do that though, because a burning heart is really like, a Jesus thing straight up. So I don't want to do that. Let's work in the arms and see what we want to do. In this image, we have the snake with its head cut off in the arms. We could do that. I mean, it's cool. It's cool. It works. We use that all the time, honestly. Let's change it up a little bit. What I'm thinking is that we could have the shepherd's staff over here, because the prophet kind of like leads people. So I'm going to throw in the shepherd's staff. It also nicely fits along the long arc of the arm. And I'm just going to use this, get a little yellow in here. I want like a little bit of a brighter brown, almost like a gold. Yeah, this is perfect. And we'll come in. I should have wet this area first, but I didn't. Come in with the shepherd's staff here. Perfect. It's kind of cool, actually. It's kind of a cool image. And it looks a little bit too much like it's just floating there for my taste right now, so I want to add in a little bit of depth. I'm going to grab this burnt sienna. This is like the wood color that I use mostly. Perfect. And I'm going to throw in some just like little brown details here. And then of course this naturally raises the question what we're going to put on the other side. What is the opposite of the shepherd's staff? What is the... If we're putting positive manifestations on the left over here, and we're putting these kind of unideal manifestations on the right, what is balancing out the shepherd's staff? Well, I guess the staff leads people. Prophets people claiming to be prophets can lead people astray. So this is the good aspect of it. Something long and brown would fit. I suppose a snake would work. I mean, I just said we always use the snake, but it actually would be kind of cool. And we could even have the snake kind of curled around. That's what we're going to do, obviously. That's what we're going to do. Let's come down over here. Perfect. I'm going to make this one a little bit more brown. Just going to throw in. Perfect. And just so it doesn't look like it's floating here like this, I thought it'd be cool to get the snake like turned around like the staff almost. Get a little tail in there. Perfect. And we're just going to throw in the head really subtly. It's almost like you might not even notice it's a snake. It's actually very fitting in a way. Cool. Cool. Perfect. Oh, dude. It's tight. Looks good. Looks good. Okay. In the chest up here where we have this little area, I kind of want to put a sun setting in here. I just feel like that would be appropriate. So I'm just going to do it. We're going to start moving it along a little bit. Perfect. But then we have to wait for this to dry so we can put the yellow sun on top of it. So that's just going to hang out there. It's going to hang out there for a minute. Let's see. In the center, in this picture, we use the sun and stuff. I'm going to put a little, like, I kind of want to put a church in the center. I mean, it's kind of like what prophets do is, like, get churches going and stuff like that. I mean, in the modern sense, the ones I'm thinking of. We can make it a little bit ambiguous. You know, it could be like a temple from back in the day, but let's just go for it. Let's just keep this train moving. I almost want to use the green grape color we had before. That was such a good color. I'm just going to grab it. Let's just keep this moving. Let's see. Anything else in the chat? I have some more stuff we can talk about, but let's see. I can only imagine how positive your physiognomy is. Thanks, man. Thanks. Uplifting comments. I suppose I have positive physiognomy. I shouldn't be too arrogant, but I suppose I probably do. My main physical issue is struggling to put on weight. So I posted a comic, you know, this sort of like, not parody, but almost like a retelling. What do you call it? It's not a parody. It's like a reworking. I don't know what to call it. Of The Raven by Poe. I posted this comic on Twitter the other day, and it's the bluebird instead of the raven. And someone, it was Isidore, he was here before, commented, Owen's not jacked? Because the guy in the comic isn't jacked. And I was like, no, I'm not jacked. I have to like struggle to not decrease to like an alarming weight, honestly. So that's my main physiognomical flaw. Since you complimented me, I guess my instinct is to humbly address my flaws. All right, let's throw down like a little sort of, speaking of humble, a little humble temple down here, a little humble church going on down here. Hook is in by hook or by crook. Yeah, we got the hook shape in there. No reason to elaborate on perennialism. Just discovering a lot of people I look up to lately aren't who I thought they were. Whoa. We've all been there, man. Hopefully my answer did not make you feel that way about me. But if it did, we can talk about it. That's interesting, though. Okay. So we're going to throw down a little humble little church. What does that look like? I got this brown color here. Just kind of go for it. It kind of fits because it'll be the same color as these. Maybe it'll just be even like a generic building. Just a little generic building. Cool. And we'll come in here. Perfect. Great. Nice. And it's interesting, you know, like I said, I've been floating around the 1800s America stuff, and I kind of realized something as I was thinking about it. You know, I think because, at least this is how it is in my brain. Just tearing off a little bit of this paper towel. You know, just talking about myself, think of the 1800s as America's second century. You know, in my mind, I'm like, it's the 1800s. This is the second century for America, right? But it's really not, because, you know, 1776 happens. I mean, it takes us a minute to get things set up, right? So really, in a weird way, if you think about it, the 1800s really is America's, like, first century, really. I mean, when we were the colonies, we were America, obviously, but I don't know if that really counts fully, to be honest with you. I'm going to kind of put the hint of like steps, maybe there's like steps over here. I'm going to paint in the windows in just the same darker color. Sometimes you get a classy effect if you're painting in something and you just use like one tone to indicate all the different stuff. You can get a nice like classy look that way. And it's just relevant because, like I said, in terms of charting the whole American spiritual situation, I think also part of why it's so interesting to me is it's not like I'm writing some like ethnographic paper. I really do feel that that draw and that energy in some way. Like when I read about this stuff, like with the Millerites and stuff like that, in case people don't know what that is, something called the Great Disappointment, where this guy said like the world was going to end basically, and then it didn't. And it was really a huge deal at the time, just putting it in a nutshell. It doesn't look like a church at all, so I'm going to try and make it look a little bit more like a church. It just looks like a normal house. Or, you know, people following these prophets and all that stuff. I mean, I really do feel that vibe. I feel that 100%. I mean, I really do feel like a North American Christian in that way. You know, if you think about it, like, Christendom is such a large folder. You know, I was thinking about the Mormons, really. I was thinking about the Mormons, right? And I'm not going to become Mormon. Maybe that needs to be said. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not going to become Mormon. But there's something about the vibe that you know, like imagine like being part of this small group. I was talking with my wife. I was like, you know, imagine being part of this small group and like, you know, you have this little subculture and all these things that like only you guys really know about, and you have like your little prophet, and people don't know about it really, you know, and you're part of this little group and you have your own little world basically. And she said, yeah, it's kind of like being an early Christian. And I was like, wow, yeah, so true. It is kind of like being an early Christian. And I thought that was interesting because Christianity is so broad that the role it takes on with the larger group and everything is so different from time to time and place to place. You know, if you're living in some Italian village and literally everyone you know is Catholic and you're just like being Catholic there, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually probably pretty awesome. But I think that person would probably feel totally different about it than, you know, someone who's, let's say, heading west in America in the 1800s, right? Of course they would. So it's interesting to see, you know, maybe how that that affects the expression of the spiritual life and the framing it takes on and the vibe and everything. It's interesting to think about. I definitely feel that like sort of freaky, weird American Christian energy in a way. You know, I feel I vibe with it. I get it. Like I posted that movie Holy Ghost People about the people in West Virginia, you know, doing all that Holy Ghost, like speaking in tongues stuff. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that, but like, I totally get it. I totally get it. I totally get it. It's actually really awesome. This little like cathedral complex here came out looking pretty awesome. You can see what I said when I started, that you do get a kind of sophisticated look when you're working with these tones and stuff like that. It's going to make an interesting situation painting in the background, but whatever, right? Whatever. I signed up for what I signed up for. Perfect. I wonder how it is in Canada. I don't know if it translates over to Canada in the same way. That would be interesting. Because they have like a little bit of the wilderness of North America vibe. They're like, wow, we really are over here also, because obviously they are. But at the same time, I don't know if they have the same wild, independent streak that America has. I know some of them do. Okay, so this sun got a little dark, but it's okay. Kind of fits, actually. And then background up here, I'm just going to throw down some blue and throw down some colors. I want to keep us moving a little bit. Perfect. I'm just going to make sure this is light enough because I want to keep the distinction between, let's call it the shirt and the rest of it. I'm going to get as low as I can. Perfect, around the sun. We'll probably have to repaint in the sun. It's not a big deal. And where's orange? I'm going to throw in some sunset colors in here. Let's see if we can just get a little perfect. Looks good. So maybe we'll just commit fully to repainting the sun, and we'll get some of the yellow up here. Nice. Some yellow. I could take it all the way there and put a little red down at the bottom. I think I'm going to do that. Maybe a little pink even. Let's see. Just a little bit. Almost imperceptible. Perfect. Cool. That looks good. Honestly, we could even leave it this kind of weird wash. The wash texture looks really good. We'll have to figure out what we're doing with this shirt. I have no idea, but we'll figure that out along the way. All right, I'm going to throw in the pants. We'll keep this moving. We're moving at a really good speed. I guess the show is like from 7 to 8:30 ultimately. Okay, let's come in here. Boom, boom. Can I go down to the bottom of the page? Almost. Let's see, I might have to... I could zoom the camera out a little bit, but I feel like that's a cop-out. I feel like I should work within the confines I've set for myself. So I'm just going to throw in the bottom of the shoes. And I am going to put them in like modern shoes because, obviously because of everything we've talked about so far. Okay. Most American churches don't look like churches anyway. Yeah, that's true. It's really true. As a Canadian, it does because our culture is heavily influenced by American culture. Not as intense, but it's still there for sure. Nice. So I'm just going to throw in, let's see. I'm going to put him in like these kind of like, I don't want to say comically modern, but just like modern sneakers. Because that tension between all the different time periods and things we're talking about is what I want to capture here. And I do listen to people talk about such things, and it is kind of compelling sometimes when they're like, well, God had prophets back then, why wouldn't he now? Well, it's kind of interesting. I know there are scriptural answers for that, but on the ground, when you really get into it, that is an interesting question. All right, so we'll throw in the pants. Boom. Perfect. Perfect. Kind of funny how he's sitting, but I like it actually, so that's all that matters, is that I like it. Just throw in a little blue in here. We could even make this kind of like the night sky in here. I've been thinking about pushing... whatever, it's fine. Cool. Pushing the blue into like some kind of nocturnal night kind of territory. We'll get a little bit of the blue out over here too. Nice. A little bit. Cool. Perfect. Cool. We have what's called a garrison mindset. We're stuck in this fort of the winter, so all the French Anglos and natives need to get along for a minute to get by. It's what informs our politeness, reputation a lot. It's really funny, actually, for Canada. It's really interesting. Yeah, and it's like I wonder how much all that stuff affects each different people groups' view of Christianity and their manifestation of it. Someone mentioned way back, someone asked, I kind of think I missed your question, but they asked Tower of Babel, that kind of thing. It's interesting because for me, the Tower of Babel story, obviously I'm like biased in a way, but a big part of it is that we're supposed to be in these like different people groups, or at least at that time that was the case. Actually, that's obviously the case in general. So then, it kind of raises an interesting question of like, I can perceive empirically that each group manifests the relationship to Christianity in like, not a different way, not that it's different, but I guess that's the best way to say it. It does manifest in like particular ways. I gotta put something in the hand over here. I guess I have a few options. I was thinking about a star. In the sketch, we have a star over here. A star is one of my favorite symbols to use because it really does, to me, represent divine guidance. The stars appear in the sky, and in Scripture, they, lead the three wise men. Just seems like a good move. It also looks very visually pleasing, but of course, that's not the reason. So I'm going to throw a star over here. Perfect. And I think on the other side, sometimes when I use symbols, it's just to get certain ideas out of my own mind. I don't necessarily expect other people or, someone else to be able to pick up what they mean necessarily. And I'm going to do that right now because on the other side, I'm going to put a symbol that I use a lot. But here it's going to be a little bit different than how I normally use it because I'm going to throw down a palm tree. Because I was thinking, what's the opposite then of the star? If the star is divine guidance, what would the opposite of that be? It's an interesting question. I was thinking about the mirage. When I think of mirages, I think of like a fake oasis or something. Probably could have come up with something better, but I want to keep us moving along, and I knew this would look good. So I'm going to throw a palm tree down over here, and we'll all know it represents a mirage. Also, in terms of like, the general symbolism, palm trees have essentially always been used as symbols for paradise, so it actually does make sense in a way with everything else. If I was really thinking on my feet, I could probably think about how and if the idea of palms and Palm Sunday and everything ties into the concept of modern prophets, but I'm not that big-brained. I am just not. I'm still learning like everyone, so I can't wing an explanation of that. But if you can, let me know. Perfect. Yeah, we'll kind of have this disappearing in here. Perfect. Perfect. Oh, that looks good. That looks great. I'm like surprised. I'm like, oh, that looks good. And we'll get a little glow on the star. Got a little bit of the... I did the exact thing I said I didn't want to do. We got like a lack of texture now. Can I just do this? Can I just do that? Yeah, looks pretty good. Do a little bit more. Cool. It was too much. Maybe we'll go back. It's fine. Let's keep it moving though. Okay. We don't actually have that much more to do, so we are going to not wrap this up soon, but we are going on a good little time scale. Let's see. I'm going to come in here even though it's wet. This might be a bad call. Oh, looks good. Perfect. I was going to say, you know, speaking of me not being able to explicate scripture on the fly, it's interesting because, you know, one other thing I like talking about with you guys is just the general, like, spiritual life and what it's like on the ground, you know. No matter how much knowledge you have, people can relate to that, whether you feel like you know everything or know nothing. We all have probably similar spiritual trials. I'm going to throw down some color in here. It sucks because I have this situation right here is what I should have done for this whole background, right? So now I have a little bit of a weird call to make where it's like, well, I have to put in some color here with the white. No color is really jumping out to me. It really should be the blue. But the sunrise is so tight, so I'm kind of just going to wing it while I'm talking to you guys. And let's see how it goes. Quickly, let's see other colors. Blue, yeah. Red sky, no. Yellow yellow could be kind of cool, I guess. Like gold, like he's wearing a gold, and then we could kind of have the glow. Yeah, we're going to do that. I'm just going to wing it a little bit right now. Anyway, though, it's interesting because I do want to read scripture more, right? I mean, probably most people feel that way. And I really noticed something about myself this morning, you know, so I've been hitting all this weird stuff, right? This stuff like the 1800s and the different groups, you know, and I'm talking about these prophets, and they all have their own texts and everything, right, you know. And I noticed something about myself this morning. It was really well illustrated because I get up before sunrise every day, and I don't like to start working immediately because my brain is not functional yet. So usually I hop on Twitter or address some emails or something, but I like using that time. You know, I'm up drinking coffee or tea or something. And I was up this morning doing that. I'm sitting in the dark, having some coffee, and I've been hitting the Mormon stuff, you know, and I was like, oh, I have this Book of Mormon. Like, I'm going to check it out and, like, you know, just see what the vibe is, you know, how it relates to, like, all the stuff, you know, vibe studies, you could say, I guess. And I started reading it, and I read, like, 20 pages of it or so. And I was like, you know, it's funny because I just picked this up and read it, right? And I've been trying to read scripture in the morning all the time, and I never do it. And I was like, that's so weird. I was like, why? And at first I was like, well, I must just not be that excited about it, right? Maybe I just happen to be more excited about reading this book than reading, like, the Bible. And I was like, no, that's not true. I was like, that's definitely not it. And I was trying to figure it out. I was sitting there and I was like, why? And I think I realized that in a weird way, I'm telling you guys this because I want to know if other people have noticed this about themselves or if other people feel this way. But I think it has to do with, like, I feel like scripture is almost like subconsciously, this is not logical at all, what I'm about to say. Like, it's almost like too important and too good for me in a way where, like, I think that subconsciously, whatever I'm doing or whatever situation I'm in or anything like that, it almost feels like it's like inappropriate to just bust out the Bible in that time and place. Like, oh, my wife's getting her you know, medical thing. I'm in the car for 15 minutes. Like, oh, well, it's like, this isn't really like an appropriate time to, you know, read scripture. That's kind of what I think subconsciously. I think, or like, oh, I just woke up and I'm drinking coffee, like, in my, you know, jeans, and I'm not wearing a shirt or something. Like, it feels like it's inappropriate, right? Like, to you know, read, like, the Word of God at this time. And there's definitely not anything logical about that. Maybe there is, but I feel like it would be better to read it, right? But I feel like I kind of, like, unlocked, like, a layer of, like, understanding about myself in a way when I realized that, because I think that is, like, what prevents me from reading scripture more. I feel like it's never the appropriate time, if that makes sense. And it kind of reminded me of, I'm going to dab this up a little bit because the colors are not exactly what I wanted, although it does look pretty cool. It kind of reminded me of in Sikhism. It's an Indian religion. They have these gurus. Sikh, like S-I-K-H. It's actually pronounced Sikh, but if you say Sikh, no one knows what you're talking about, so I just call it Sikhism, but I know that it's not pronounced that way. They have these gurus, right? They have these, like, 8 gurus or whatever in their religion. Maybe it's 7. And then the last one is a book. The last guru is, like, the eternal guru, and it's a book. And when they have the book around, I've seen it. Like, they have it, like, on a little stand, and it has, like, a special cloth. I'm not making fun of them. I'm just telling you how it is. And it's like they treat it like a hyper, like, reverential object, you know? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, yeah, if you do that, like, you're not going to be like what I just said, like, oh, my wife's running into Walmart, I better hit the book really quick. I mean, maybe you would, but, and I don't know, I was wondering how I could, like, fix that or how I could adjust that, because there's really no reason for me to feel that way. It's certainly not logical. I mean, certainly I have the book, like, to read it, right, obviously. That's never happened. Someone's calling me while the show's going on. Oh, it's a tornado warning. Cool. So I was wondering, what I could do about that, or if I should think about, like, doing something about that. But anyway, the point isn't, like, solving the problem. The point is that I thought it was interesting to notice that about myself. And I bet that subconsciously some other people do feel that way. I only noticed it because, like I said, I pounded, like, 20 or 30 pages of the Book of Mormon, and then I looked back and I was like, wait, I've been trying to read, like, what's the explanation here? Anyway. So I thought that was interesting. There's an interesting thing there, too, where it's, like, feeling, like, worthy to participate in things of a divine nature in a weird way. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot to, like, unpack in that, like, little anecdote. And I was thinking about it all day, because, like, I'm waiting in the waiting room for some medical thing, Yeah, like, I probably wouldn't, like, read the Bible in that time, but, like, wouldn't it be better if I did instead of just, like, being like, oh, it's not the appropriate time. It's not the right time. But I don't know. Maybe there is, like, maybe it is disrespectful to, like, just pop into, like, the Exodus at, like, a gas station. I feel like it's not, though, right? I don't know. Interesting question. Let me know what you think about that. Now is when we need the literal call-in situation, because I could just, like, go to the phones. But let me know what you think about that. I'm throwing some hills back here. Kind of got the sunrise color looked cool, but it was a little bit too close to the cross color here. That looks pretty good. He's kind of in, like, a tie-dye robe. Tie-dye-ish robe, but it's okay. Maybe, like, Technicolor Dreamcoat thing going on a little bit over here. I'm going to throw some clouds in here. And then I'm going to see if you guys said anything about that whole situation. Don't have time to draw mirages. No one has time to draw mirages. We have wives to lust over. Yeah, true. 100%. I can't casually read the Bible. It feels weird. Yeah, there you go. So it's not just me. Cool. But, when I think about it, maybe there probably is something about that. You know what I mean? Like, I suppose we should be, like, a little reverential. I think there's probably, like, an Aristotelian mean there. I feel really smart when I say that. I feel like there is, like, an average somewhere in between where, like, you're not treating it like, nothing, but you're also not, like, locking yourself out of it because you feel like you're, like, not good enough for it. I think that was probably, like, where I was noticing some type of, like, pathology, where it's like, oh, I'm not, like, worthy to, like, read this book, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm throwing some, like, cloud shapes up here. Okay, this is looking pretty solid. I'm going to put a road, and then we're going to do the pants, and then we're probably about to be wrapped up. It's 8:17, so it's perfect timing. Let's see if anyone else said anything about that, though. I'm just going to come in. Can I do it with the one pass? Yeah, kind of. It's not really dark enough, though. Otherwise, I would have hit it with the one pass. Perfect. Cool. All right, let's see. That was a good question. Let's see if anyone said anything interesting. Do you use a study Bible or a devotional at all? I'll come back to that. Can relate, though some parts seem tougher to read without being focused. Like Genesis and the Book of the Kings are easier to pop in. Isaiah needs, like, really slow, focused reading. Yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah, also, what's up, Cody? Yeah, that's true. I think that's also part of why I really gravitated to the minor prophets and stuff in the back of the book when I was younger, because I felt like I could just pop in and read the whole thing and get in and out in a second. So that is interesting. Okay, we will talk more about that, but we got to wrap it up. We're actually it's going pretty well here. It's going pretty well. Let's do the pants and then see where we're at. Okay, so we got our sketch over here. We changed it up a little bit. Working with the sketch is really interesting. We might do that more. Here we have the pants. It's like water with a boat and some whales. I guess, actually, I was going to say I probably just did that randomly because I didn't know what to put there. But whales, Jonah, prophet, kind of does make sense, actually. It also would look really tight. Let's see if anything else comes up, though. I'm looking at the colors. I think this is going to kind of be a partially color-based decision. Yellow, definitely not. Browns, I'm looking at the browns. Let's go with the whale thing. I mean, that's pretty interesting. They'll also let us kind of pencil in like a skeleton or a person onto the whales. So let's just go for it. We're going to break out a color blue that we very rarely use, which is ultramarine. We essentially never use this color. Not for any reason. It's kind of supposed to be like lapis lazuli color almost. Sanctifying a space such as a prayer closet has been helpful for me to read it more. Yeah, that's probably true also. Like if I'm going to bed and I'm just sitting there and like my bed's not dirty, obviously. But like, you know, if I'm just sitting there, you know, it kind of feels weird. So maybe like sanctifying a space, yeah. Okay, let's just throw it in. I had that wave pattern down there, but I'm trying to change it up. So let's just go for it. I'm wondering if this totally flat line will... I don't want it to break up how the picture's being read, basically. So let's see. I'm going a little light because if it's too dark, I don't want to lose the legibility that we have here. Also, the ultramarine as a color, this is where it gets good to know the pigments that you're using. It really does look good when you get it all thinned out. It's a nice blue at any opacity. So let's see. I'm going to come in here. Perfect. Oh yeah, someone asked if I use a study Bible. I have a Catholic one and an Orthodox one, and I used to have a KJV also, and I would just have them all together. It was kind of absurd and cool, honestly. But interestingly enough, there's also some kind of interesting note here. I'm going to come in with the dark. Maybe I'm going to regret it, but I feel like I had to. I feel like I had to get the dark going. It looks good. But the New Testament in the Orthodox Study Bible is the KJV translation. I'm like 99% sure, which is kind of interesting that they would use that. So now I have no reason to carry the KJV around also. So I use that, and then the best thing I have, which I would recommend everyone have on their phone immediately, is an app called Catena. It is insane. You can look up any Bible verse and get sources for commentary from like all the church fathers and everything. It's one of the most insane apps and tools that I have for my studies. It's so awesome. Wow, the color here looks really good. That looks really good. So I would definitely recommend that. It's called Catena. C-A-T-E-N-A. And you know, I'm going to keep the sunrise, sunset thing going. I didn't really see us pushing that direction so hard, but let's just do it. I'm just going to throw in the yellow, and I'm hoping that when I throw in the yellow down here, it'll contextualize the yellow above, and it'll all kind of fit together nicely. Let's see. Perfect. Throw this down. Great. I had the same problem with like Bible audiobook stuff, to be honest with you. Like it feels weird to be like walking my dog and like I'm listening to like the Gospel of John. You know, I'm like, shouldn't I kind of be like paying more attention than this? So I only tried that one time. Not that it's bad. If other people do it and have success, like that's great, obviously. But it just wasn't really my vibe. Perfect. Perfect. I almost want to throw down a little bit more of a sunrise motif down at the bottom. I'm going to do it. Just a little bit of the red. Yeah, nice. It's actually really perfect. I should really just stop because the red just like tearing off like that is so good, but I can't stop. I literally can't stop. I'm just going to keep going. Perfect, perfect. Stop. I have to stop, but I can't stop. Okay, good. That's good enough. Perfect. Okay. We'll get the whales in, and then we might be approaching a pretty good point here. Do you ever worry that you do too much wandering around with the theology and not enough working on where to settle down? Yeah, it's interesting, man. You know, it's interesting because I have all these different aspects kind of like cooking at the same time. Like sometimes I'm researching things in like an academic way. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to know more about this, and I'm going to... Where's my Prussian blue? Can't even find it. Because I want to throw down the whales, and I'm really feeling like I should use that color, but I might just not. Maybe I dropped it. It's very unprofessional on the show. I'm going to make a call here, and then I'm going to answer your question. Let's see, I want to add the whales in. I could make them black. That would be such a power move to add black at this last stage. Such a dangerous call. Should I do it?
Or should I just add the ultramarine? That's what I'm going to do. I think the black, I was willing to take it there, but I think I would regret that. So I'm just going to add the ultramarine and Prussian blue. Yeah, man, it's really interesting because like I have all these different nodes cooking at the same time that on the surface appear to be the same thing. But like sometimes I'm looking into something for purely knowledge reasons where I'm like, oh, I should know more about this. And I don't. And then sometimes I'm looking into things for like spiritual reasons where I'm like, oh, I want to see if this is like the spiritual angle for me or like how this affects my spiritual life. And then sometimes I'm looking into things for aesthetic reasons. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a picture about X, Y, and Z, so I have to know about X, Y, and Z. And it gets a little cloudy sometimes, but I think that also gives me a lot of like room to like move around. What I really need to do is cultivate more of a prayer life, to be totally honest with you. I am totally lacking on that. I really think I do sometimes use like learning about religion as a substitute for doing the things that I should do. Probably a lot of people can identify with that. And then also on top of that, it's interesting because like my artwork is roped into my spiritual life entirely. Like the artwork is like an expression of it. But then sometimes I really am just drawing like random stuff. Not random, but you know, sometimes I make a comic that is not like an expression of my theological energy. Although actually, I don't know, maybe they all are. But you know what I'm saying. Sometimes I'm making like a picture of Virgin Mary. Sometimes I'm making like a comic or something. So yeah, it's a lot of things that are all tangled together, but I really just need like more of a solid prayer rule. I've heard the term prayer rule where like you do X, Y, and Z every day. Obviously, I kind of need to do that. Okay, I think the last detail I'm going to put in before we kind of reassess, we're right at 8:30 almost, is I'm just going to put a person over here and maybe a skull over here in this whale. And that'll be like the binary that we maybe wrap it up with. I'll quickly put those in and then we'll see where we're at. And picture-wise, I could put them in white, but you know that's going to be the area of highest contrast. Then the white with the almost black, so your eye's just going to get drawn there so hard. So I don't want it to be that light. I actually want that to not be the case. So I'm going to dull this down even darker than I think I should. Okay. Oh, it's so wet. It's so wet it doesn't work. Yeah, I'll let it dry. I'll throw in the shoes. We'll hang out for a second. I'm actually just going to use the color that I kind of like these just white shoes like this because it's ambiguous if they're pointed down or if they're pointed at you, but I guess I should put something in here. Let's see, anyone else say anything? I use the cool Safari Bible with a jungle aesthetic. That's tight. Your situation sounds like a good opportunity for earthly detachment. Yeah. I have like a family life now though with my wife and stuff and everything. Okay. Just gonna fuzz this in. Okay, the last detail. Let's be creative about this. We got these whales here. You know what I'm going to do? They're so dark. I was thinking of doing this anyway. I'm just going to blot up the center a little bit. And that'll let me paint into them. Oh, yes. Nice. Perfect. Didn't change it that much, which is perfect. Great. Great. Had a little bit more of an interesting texture there. Perfect. And then let's see. Now I'm in a weird space because what color do I add it in there? Maybe I don't even add it in. Really torn. Really torn about how to handle this last little detail. I'm looking at all the colors. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try something a little bit crazy here. I'm going to try and put it in red. Perfect. Yeah, that looks really good. It's really kind of singing out brightly, but that's okay. And it's so wet that I can't control it too much, which is kind of good, actually. Perfect. Perfect. Oh, dude, the red on the dark. Oh, dude. So tight. Since this is the last detail, I'm going to try something a little bit different over here, too. I'm just going to put in the sitting skull inside the whale. I'm in love with how this red looks on the blue. Man, that is a great little color note down here. So good. I want to make sure it reads, so I'm going to make the eyes a little bit bigger than I normally would. Perfect, perfect. Oh, dude. Wow, what a good note to end on, the red and blue. Dude. So good. Color is just such a powerful tool. Man, that's like the best part of the whole picture. Man, looks great. And I don't know, should I put the sun in here? I feel like I need to balance it out. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a few snap decisions here at the end. Yeah, that needed to happen. Oh, wow. That really, really tied it up nicely. I think we're good, man. Oh, there's one more thing I have to address, but we're right at the edge of like 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, but I have to address it slightly, so I'm actually just going to try and kick up the pigment and fade it back in with the hands. I don't want to actually put anything in the hands, but I just want to have them be addressed. You know, if they're just white, it looks like they're unaddressed. Looks like I forgot them or something. That's what unaddressed means. So I'm going to come in here, and we'll just fade this in, and then that'll be the last thing we do. See if anyone asks me anything, and then we'll wrap this party up. This is a really good one. This is a really good one. Damn. Come back over here a little bit, grab a little bit more color. Perfect. Probably a little bit too much, but it's okay if this is like the dark hand. It's okay. Yeah. Oh, dude. Good. See if I can scoop up a little bit of this color. Just a little bit. Great. Great. Oh, great. Okay. Let's see how this looks. I'm going to move some brushes around. Boom, 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 boom. I've developed the bad habit of just throwing my tubes of paint on the palette while we're working. It's okay. I'm going to move the mic really quick so I can just move this. This is what I really need to move so we can actually see what we're working with here. Nice. Okay, I'm going to definitely declare this one a success. This was a really good one. It's probably one of my favorite ones we've done in a while. Great. Okay, I'm going to look away for a second, and then we'll make the call about wrapping it up. You still doing Our Lady of Sorrows devotions? Yeah, I was doing that for a while. I kind of stopped, actually, because I got really sad about something else. It's a very like childish way of viewing it, but I paused it for a minute. But I have it hanging next to my bed, which is just me being a spiritual materialist now and trying to brag about not doing something. But no, I was doing it for a little bit. I'm probably going to get back into it. I'm kind of trying to decide. This is a good note to end on also. I'm kind of trying to decide like what my like rule for like what I do every day is with praying stuff. I can't really tell. I mean, I have like a prayer book. I feel like I should just build up and like do the prayer book and like, you know. But I'm really bad at regimenting stuff into my life because I am a workaholic. So that's the short answer. Anyway, yeah, I think this one looks great. Do we need to review anything? Like I always say at the end, I feel like I need to do a recap, but you were just here. I think this one looks sick though. I guess unexpectedly, the color fade in the hoodie actually looks really tight. At first, I really didn't like it, and I was like, wow, I kind of made a mistake here. But I think that, just if we're analyzing like picture making and the meta creative aspect of it, I think taking the yellow out of just the hoodie and bringing it down here really rounded out the colors a lot. I think also bringing the red down here made it more of like an integrated gradient, an integrated picture. At first I really didn't like that, but I think it came out really well. I think it looks really, really good. Nice. We also got to push the texture when we're painting more. Like this looks really tight. The texture here looks really tight. This looks really tight. All my favorite little nodes are where we're getting texture that shows the nature of the medium. It's a good way to say it. So we should just keep in mind, even these clouds are kind of like sitting on top. So we want to make sure that we keep pushing that as we go forward. But overall, this is definitely a very successful one. Cool. All right, it's 8:34. It's about that time. So we're going to wrap it up. Oh, you can see underneath my desk. Whoa. Secret details. There's just a book down there. All right. So thanks for coming through. That was really fun. I always have a really great time doing these. What should I say at the end? Announcement style. I got more prints coming up. I have like 20 of the cryptid prints sitting over here on this desk because I have to wrap them up. Dropping more of those. I'm dropping more of the rosary prints. And then I got a bunch of crazy stuff coming out, man. It's going to be so sick. I'm really gearing up for Summer of Power over here. So thanks for staying tuned. I'm really amped to show you guys. Thanks for dropping by. And now we return back to the spiritual chessboard, the spiritual warfare we all do every day, together and individually. Mostly together, though, hopefully. And I will see you guys on the internet, where we all hang out together. Thanks for coming through.